Well, two birds, two bets, and of course, crazy people. They say that truth is stranger than fiction. And if this story doesn't prove that, I don't know what does. I am going to be referring to the people in this video as John and Jane Doe because I know them and I simply want to keep them anonymous. In other words, all the names have been changed to protect the guilty. And if you hang in here, you're going to find out about the guy that slept with the maid and how that began and what ensued in the middle and how it also came to a conclusion. All right, hang on, and here goes my little video. Well, all righty. This story, as so many of my stories do, comes straight from the horse's mouth. And this gentleman contacted me, I would say 4 or 5 months ago, something to that effect, and had been watching videos, mine, other people's, and simply was gracious enough to invite me out for a cup of coffee. And I accepted. We sat down. We had a conversation for about an hour and a half. And I've got to tell you that his story took a lot more twists and turns as far as his background and history than most of the guys that I meet. And so he had a very, very varied lifestyle back in America. He had worked as a hospice care nurse for many, many years. Prior to that, he had done his 20, as they say, in the military. And he even shared with me, without going into a great amount of details, that he had actually spent a stretch in prison. And I asked him, I go, do I need to be worried about this? He goes, no. It's nothing like that. And I said, okay. So I never dug into those details, and I never do. It's his business, but I was really kind of impressed with his transparency. And so it also came to my attention, he wasn't bragging or anything, but that he has a military pension, he has Social Security, and he has investments. I think gold is one of them. And so financially, he's not at all hurting. He's not one of these guys that's over here trying to live on $1,000 a month because of that fable. But he's doing fine. He was divorced, and then his wife, after divorce, she passed away, and they have a daughter. And in fact, he's well off enough financially that his daughter, I didn't get into the details of it again, but she's unable to actually care for herself. And so he sends her money every month and pays for her apartment, makes her car payment, and money for incidentals. So basically all around, pretty good guy. And then he became friends with some of my friends. And so now we not only are, him and I are friends, but we have mutual friends. And that's kind of an integral part of the story. Because after the initial meeting, I didn't see him for about a month. And he was busy, as most guys are, setting up camp, getting an apartment or a house, figuring out things and whatnot, and had been communicating with another friend of mine who was more proactive with him than I had been. And so our mutual friend was throwing a little gathering for his daughter's birthday. And myself and a number of other people, maybe 4 or 5 couples, were invited to go and share in that celebration. And here comes John Doe. And when I saw John Doe, he was with this strikingly beautiful woman. John Doe, I'm going to say, is 70 if he's a day. And I'm going to say she's not a day over 24. And John, like me, is no George Clooney, but Jane Doe was really, really attractive in all aspects. And when I looked at her and I looked at him, I saw in her some kind of a disconnect to some degree. And I kind of just put that in the back of my mind. And she didn't say much. She was just there. He was enjoying himself. We all hung out together, and party ended. I called our mutual friend up, and I said, hey, man, I said, old John Doe there, I said, I didn't know he had a girlfriend. He says, yeah. He says, well, let me tell you the story, because they had been closer than him and I had been. And this is the story that I was told verbatim. John Doe rented a house, and his yard was a mess. So he went to the landlord and complained, or at least mentioned, he said, you know what, I've rented this house and the yard needs to be cleaned up. And the landlord agreed and said, okay, I'll send somebody over in the morning. So the next day, sure enough, the landlord kept his promise, and in comes this woman, this beautiful woman, and she starts cutting the grass out in the heat and raking the leaves and whatnot. And she came to the door and knocked on it and asked for a glass of water, which he provided. And so he was, awestruck by her, but he didn't really say anything. He just allowed her to keep working. And then there was a knock on the door when she was done. And she said, listen, I'm kind of in need of work. Would you like me to be a housekeeper with you? Would you like me to come in and clean your house? I'm done with the yard. And he said, yeah, that would be a good idea. How much do you want? And she said, I want 300 pesos per day, which is the standard number for housekeeper. And John Doe, I didn't mention, has got a lot of money because he keeps a real grip on it. He does support his daughter, but that's family. That's fine. And he actually negotiated with her, and I think they settled on 245 pesos. And that's, of this whole story, that's the thing that just rings my bell the most, is why in the world was he be grinding this woman down for about $1? That would mean a lot more to her than it would to him. But I guess that's just his nature, is to be what we call a cheap Charlie. So he says, okay, when can you start? They agree on the 245. Let's call it 250 for round numbers. He beat her out of $1. And she said, I'll come back tomorrow. Yeah, all right. Tomorrow rolls around. She shows up and she's got a suitcase. And he said, what are you doing with that suitcase? And she said, well, if you want me to be, your housekeeper, your maid, wouldn't it be better if I just moved in? And that way I can cook for you, I can clean and take care of the house, and that way if you need anything, I'm always here. And he goes, well, I guess that would be okay. I've got a spare bedroom. So that's exactly what happened. So that evening, she did just that. She came in, she cleaned the house, she cooked dinner. He said they sat around and they actually ate popcorn and watched a movie together the first night. And he finally said, it was about 9 o'clock, I guess, I'm going to go to bed. And she said, okay, me too. And so she went off to take a shower. He went to bed. And after she took her shower, she came into his bedroom wearing lingerie and said, do you mind if I sleep here with you? And man being a man, he said, no problem. And so that's exactly what happened. Now, I think I mentioned a little earlier that he was a cheap Charlie. And so what he told her was they moved in, and now they're, I guess, officially boyfriend and girlfriend after that first evening. And he let her know, you can stay here, and I'll house you, and I'll feed you, and if I go somewhere, I'll pick up the check. But you're not getting that 250 anymore. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you know what? That's pretty strong. I kind of agree with that if you're taking care of them, they don't need to have a salary. small as it may be, or an allowance, small as it may be, other than for incidentals. I mean, I would never deny anybody a couple of bucks to, go buy feminine products or something. But that was his MO. And they stayed together for a while. And after about 2 weeks, she said, I have a daughter, and I need to go see her. And he said, okay. So he did give her the money, the bus fare, for a 4-hour drive to go see her daughter. And then when she came back a few days later, they renewed everything. And she said, you know what, I have this daughter, and I got my mama and my papa, the usual family story, right? And I need to give them some money. And he said, well, then you need to get a job. Not the typical response that you hear from those guys. He stood his ground. He was setting his boundaries. And she got a job at an okai store, I think making 200 pesos a day. She got cut off from the 250 and now she's down to 2. And that sounds perfect because May shops at okai, my wife, all the time, and she knows that's about what they make, which is the equivalent of about $4 or $5 a day. And she was shipping that off to the family for months. They stayed together for, I believe, 3 months. And finally, she said, well, I need to go back and see my family. And he goes, okay, I'll go with you. I'd like to meet your daughter, and I'd like to meet your family. So they go together to her hometown, about 4 hours from Dumaguete, and they spend some time there, and he actually parted with a few dollars. I don't pretend to know how much, but he did give the family some money when he saw the conditions that they were living in and whatnot. And so they came back, and she continued to work for a while, and he had actually bought her an engagement ring. He said, I think we should get married. I'm in love with you, this, that, and the other. And she said, yeah, but you don't buy me anything. You don't do anything. He says, no, I'm not going to. Like I said, I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to give you food. I'm going to give you shelter. I'm going to give you protection from the storm, etc. And so one day, so she started getting online and talking to other guys. And one day, she just, like she came up with the suitcase, she just picked up and left. And I got to give her credit where credit's due. She left the engagement ring on the nightstand. That spoke a little bit to her character, I think. However, she better dealed him. And so she had met another guy on another island, done the dating site or the Facebook, however, it was online. And she went out there to meet him and moved in. And the minute she was gone, he went into panic mode because I think I mentioned she was just drop dead gorgeous. And for a guy like him to duplicate that would, or for anybody for that matter, would have been really going through some trials and tribulations. And he was not having any success as he tried. And all of a sudden, he changed his tune. And he said, listen, she broke up with the guy that she went to go meet. She stayed with him for about a week, whatever the differences they had. And then she went to another island to meet another guy. I know this is complicated, but this is how it went. And he found out where she was. He was still in communication with her. And he said, listen, I will change my attitude. You can have this, you can have that. You want a phone, I'll buy you a phone. You want an allowance, I'll give you an allowance. And her response was, well, pound sand. She had had enough of him and now just had a distaste in her mouth for him and possibly didn't believe him. I don't know. I'm kind of interjecting my own opinion there and probably shouldn't do that, but there's the scenario that played in my head. So what does he do? Does he give up? Nope. He says, I know what I'll do. I will go up and I will get her daughter and I will get her family and I'll bring them back to my place, and I'll put them up. Definitely, she will come back to us now. She broke up with boyfriend number one. It's a little murky in my head about boyfriend number two, but I don't think they were staying together any longer either. And this was on yet another island. And so he moves in, the whole kit and caboodle. The daughter gets her enrolled in school. The mama and the papa got them set up in the spare bedroom. And he contacts her and he says, hey, listen, I've got your daughter here. I've got your mother and your father here. I will take care of you. I will change my ways. And for the second time, she said, not interested. So now John Doe is stuck with the daughter, the mother, and the father, and he doesn't know how to get them out of the house. She's not coming back. That was the only motivation for moving them in. And so they stayed with him for over a month, and he kept trying to get them to go home, and they just kept saying, no, I like it here. And so I asked my friend, who had told me all these sordid details this evening, I said, did he ever get the family out? He goes, oh yeah. And he says, and he's working on another girl in Manila and another girl in Cebu and this and that. And I said, well, back up, buddy. How did he get the family out of the house? He said, well, he told them, hey, let's all go into Dumaguete. And he loaded everybody, mama, papa, and the daughter into his vehicle. And he drove into Dumaguete, and then he just kept driving for 4 more hours and took them straight home. Just said, that's it, hop out, see you later, bye. Here's a couple of bucks. Sorry it didn't work out. And came back home. So that, my friends, is the story of the man who slept with the maid. I personally have never heard a story that's true. And like I said, truth is always stranger than fiction. You can't make this stuff up. And how this story evolved, and what I found to be interesting was once she left and he realized what he lost, how he was willing to cave in at that point, because he figured that he had had this diamond and now he had lost it, and he was doing anything and everything to get it back. And I think at the end of the day, the hero of this story is Jane Doe, because you know what? She set her boundaries after they broke up, and she stuck to it. Even when he tried to use her own family to recover her, she said no. And to me, I would be curious as to what your opinion of him is. In the initial part, I thought it's great that he's not trying to buy her love like a lot of guys do. Guys call leading with your wallet. He just told her, no, this is the way it's going to be. But she wanted a little bit more. I think he was a little too tight. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say in the comments. All right, if you stuck with me this long, I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next video.